that was such a trying period of my life. Was like I was her friend and I was helping her with like getting to treatment once a week. Like I didn't mind doing that, and then kind of slowly she became more in my life, and then she moved in, and then all of a sudden I'm like not just her roommate, I'm like her caregiver. And it became this place that it was just the need was so tremendous, and it's like my heart is so big I can't just turn away from that. And so in that whole process I forgot to take care of myself and how to have like healthy boundaries. And like it's been months after and I'm still trying to figure that out.
Yes.
And so, and like to just recuperate and heal from like loss and grief in general. I don't know how I survived those like 2 years or like year and a half of like literally taking care of my dying friend. But I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Hello, and welcome to The Art of Lost and Found, a podcast that explores the creative relationship between our inner and outer worlds. It's a creative exploration through stories, insights, resources, and tools to help you intentionally design your life and work. I'm your host, Brooke Eston, also known as the Creative Amplifier. I'm part strategist, part designer, part coach, and part artist. And I'm dedicated to helping fellow creatives bridge the gaps between those big dreams and practical realities. Now let's get into it. Today, we welcome a very special creative powerhouse and true soul sister, Joanne Garcia. As a first-generation, all-American girl raised by Filipino immigrants in the U.S., Jo is one of those rare breeds of creatives who's equal parts creative thinker and master executor. She can imagine a creative possibility, then create a detailed project management system, and then follow it all the way through to completion. She doesn't fall prey to shiny object syndrome like so many other creatives, but instead brings her type A organizational skills to meet her bias towards action. In layman's terms, she's a creative who gets shit done. In a nutshell, Jo is the creative director you want by your side as you plan, strategize, and execute on your branding, content creation, and project execution. She's a strategist, designer, photographer, YouTuber, and creative project manager. Her clients have included Intel, JW Marriott, Macy's, Vivienne Westwood, Writers Guild of America, and many more. While it is such an incredible blessing to have met Jo, the circumstances of our meeting were heartbreaking. If you've been following me for a while, then you know about my dear friend Elaine and her 4-year-long battle with breast cancer, which took her life just 1 year ago. In fact, this time last year, I was on a plane from Spain to Mexico to be with her as she made her final transition to the other side. In the last most difficult years of Elaine's life, Jo, who had previously been her friend and college roommate, stepped into the most demanding role of her life, being the caretaker of our dying friend. In this episode, we speak about Jo's creative journey, the love, loss, and redemption that she has experienced, and how her creativity has been an essential part of her burnout recovery, and how she's using it to reclaim her life in the wake of extreme loss. Without further ado, let's dive in. You're such an interesting combination of somebody who's so structured and ordered and type A and organized and like, I got the plan, everything, all we have to do is just follow this plan. And then inevitably life is like, hey, I'm life. I don't really do plans. Comes in, like messes the whole thing up. And then instead of totally freaking out and going into paralysis, like you are incredibly resilient. Like it's almost without thinking. You're like, okay, that didn't work. What about this? Okay, let's try this. Let's try this. Like it's such a unique combination of someone who's so orderly and type A, but also somebody who's so fluid and creative and resourceful and resilient. And that is a unique combination that you, Joe Garcia, are the master.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I feel like that one, it's kind of neat and kind of like humbling to hear that, just because like I feel like I've been like through the refiner like fire of like I had to learn how to do that. Mastering that did not come easy. It's because I've had so many trial and errors like throughout the way, where it's like you can only like complain and whine about it for like 2 seconds before you have to like, let's get into troubleshooting mode. And I feel like it's okay to like if experience things that kind of like hiccups that get in your way, but I'm like, you could only complain for it for a little while, because you can't let that like keep you frozen. And so like it's like, okay, what can I do to kind of like still make this work? What can I do to kind of work around it? Like, and so a lot of that is just managing myself, but also managing whatever's around me, and whether that's people or like things or projects or client expectations.
Yeah, and I think there's something really powerful about the way that you move through that, because I have a similar quality of being having a bias towards action, but I also sometimes bring some attitude in a way
Oh,
that I
I
have
know it.
not seen, that I have not seen you. You've seen me, but I haven't seen you
Yeah.
with the attitude.
There are times, and I've been told this in the past, because I've had assistants in the past where they know when I step into like choleric mode, where I'm like, girls, we gotta do this, and they know that
Mhm.
Joe means business, because I will do my best to manage people as well as I can, to kind of like nudge you along, kind of
Yeah.
set you up for success, try to get things moving. But if you guys fool around too much, I'm like, we don't have time for this.
Yeah.
And so I it takes me a while to get there sometimes, but I'm like you, like I'm like all about action. I'm like, so many people are all about plans and no follow through, and I'm
Yeah.
like, nothing really matters unless you're doing something.
Exactly.
So I'm like, even if it's like tiny little baby steps, do 1, 2, 3 things, and at least you're that much closer to whatever you're trying to do. So that's how
Yeah.
I think about things. But I appreciate the way that you you have your action, like, let's do this, guys.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's important to speak a little bit about the context of how you and I know each other, because
yeah.
this issue that we're talking about is something that we were very involved around, because
Yeah.
you and I had the fortunate experience of meeting each other in a really unfortunate situation
Yeah.
where someone who we were very close with and loved dearly fought a valiant battle with cancer for, what was it, 3 or 4 years
It was 4
almost?
years, but I think like the fundraising and like the team oriented action plan fundraising group actually started to like the last 2 years. I would say like the last 2 years, right at the beginning of COVID, is kind of when things kind of grouped together. And
Yeah.
so it started off with probably like a team of like 10 or 12, and
Mhm.
it just kind of like like people started phasing out, because it was
Yeah.
very demanding, like having to show up for your friend who is really, really terminally sick. But you, me, and another girl, like we were the ones who really stuck it out through like everything. And so even though it sucked to kind of like go through a lot of that and a lot of the heaviness and the burdens, one of the things that I'm really thankful for is like the friendships that I got out of that.
Mhm.
So definitely
Yeah.
like meeting you through that was like one of the best things.
Yeah. I feel like Elaine lives on in our active present relationships,
Yeah.
and she's present, she's present in this conversation. And I think it's also worth saying that when you're in the scariest, hardest, most difficult moments of a struggle, and while you and I weren't the ones with cancer, we were so close to that. And
Yeah.
sometimes it can even feel weird, feel worse to be that close to something, but not actually have any control or any power or any way to make it better.
Yeah.
And although Elaine was a creative powerhouse in so many ways,
Yeah.
she did not have that same bias towards action. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, it's she was fighting for her life. So
Yeah.
the context around this, is really important. But in terms of having the skills around prioritization and understanding the order of things. For
Hmm.
example, like we were raising a lot of money because she wasn't able to get the governmental support she needed because she hadn't done some bureaucratic, tax thing or applied
Yeah.
for, like there were these really unfortunate bureaucratic blocks, but that also was the landscape of what was needed to move forward through that experience.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, I think the support group started off really strong, but to your point earlier, if that doesn't translate into tangible action where you can see some kind of progress or
Yeah.
momentum or something, then a lot of times it it dissipates, it loses steam, like things drop
Yeah.
away. And one of the things that I really take away from that experience going through all of that together was just how committed and consistent and empathetic and creative you were. Like you were there for her for all of it. Like you took her into your home, you were helping her with everything, and to the point where you and I have talked about this, and we'll hopefully talk about this a little bit more, um, is that when you have those tendencies towards action, towards wanting to help people you love, a lot of times it can be difficult to have clear clear boundaries
Oh yeah.
around how do I take care of myself in this? How do I know how far I can contribute before it starts to impact me? And I think that one of the beautiful things that I learned in this experience with you and Elaine was really about sacrifice and love, but also coming to terms with the fact that that's not sustainable unless we also know how to care for ourselves in that process.
Yeah. That was such a trying period of my life. Was like I was her friend and I was helping her with like getting to treatment once a week. Like I didn't mind doing that, and then kind of slowly she became more in my life, and then she moved in, and then all of a sudden I'm like not just her roommate, I'm like her caregiver. And it became this place that it was just the need was so tremendous, and it's like I my heart is so big I can't just turn away from that.
Yeah.
And so in that whole process, I forgot to take care of myself and how to have like healthy boundaries. And like it's been months after and I'm still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
And so and like to just recuperate and heal from like loss and grief in general, but like it's it's kind of been a while since I talked about it because honestly, like I don't know how I survived those like 2 years or like year and a half of like literally taking care of my dying friend. But I wouldn't I wouldn't trade it for anything, you know? And so I'm really glad I was there for her and to help her not only to like get her drinks and, medicine ready and to like take her to treatment or like hold her hand through certain chemos, but to like actually help her do the things that we need to do to kind of
Yeah.
get her message and her story out to the world. And like she's a creative powerhouse and I'm kind of like an art producer person. So it was
Yeah.
a beautiful matchup to be like, hey, let's just make some videos real quick. Like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
let's just take some photos real quick. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me to be there to document some things, I think that was a really like kismet kind of like match make. we were roommates like 20 years ago. So it's just kind of cool that we're roommates again and still like creative in that sense. And it
Yeah.
like fit well. And so she was an incredible muse to like document life and do all of that with, because that girl was a survivor. She was
Mhm.
fighting for her life, and she
Yeah.
extended it by years because she advocated for herself. And so, it was a lot of work towards the end.
Yeah. I think one of the things that really stood out for me also was how how much fun you had with her. Even
It's so
in
much
those
fun.
times, like even in those times when, when it was so low, and although she was not um, really, she didn't come to terms with the fact that she was dying until really the day she died. Um, but from the perspective of the outsiders close to her, we had a sense of her deterioration. And so even in that, you were still like making YouTube videos and going to concerts, and so much laughter and joy and creative expression and play, even in the darkest of times.
Yeah. Elaine had to do so much treatment and so much like all these exercises, driving back and forth, doing all these diet things, trying to do all these different treatments at home. And it would be all this work to get maybe like one good hour where she felt okay. And like that's the hour that we watched like a K-drama, or like that's the time that we were able to kind of like, oh yeah, this is the day that she does chemo and that's when she feels the best. That's the day we're going to film videos for the channel. And so it's like trying to figure out what to do, because these are the things that kind of brought her joy. And I know for her, she like very much, she knew that she was a cancer patient, but she like didn't want to live like one where she's like that all the time. Like
Yeah.
she wanted to like live life like a normal person. I remember one time she got to go to the movies and she was like, "Joe, I feel like it was like a regular day and I was just at the movies with friends." And I was like, "Yeah." Like so it's really interesting going back to like our YouTube channel, because sometimes I just like miss my friend a lot, and I'll just watch a bunch of our videos of us like having fun.
Me
And
too.
I'm just so thankful I have those moments like recorded so I could go back to them.
And as a creative in particular, I think you have a really powerful way of being able to not only just capture those moments, but to be able to create a story, to capture a narrative, to be able to share. One of the things that I value most about you is your commitment and your consistency. Like this goes back to the resilience. Can you share a little bit about how that experience was for you, and how you were able to use your creativity and your all of the abilities that you have to be able to move through that experience in a way that felt life-giving and creative and joyful, even in the most difficult context?
Yeah, so I I'm the type of person that like takes photos of everything, videos of everything. I like to document everything. And I do that in a way that I don't really know what story I'm going to tell yet, but I just need to capture moments, and then I'll worry about weaving the story or the narrative together later. And so I remember when Elaine, she moved in with me right around the time she was on like the chemo pill. So she was pretty, she kept the cancer in check, and she was okay. Like she was able to maintain the cancer, and she was like, we were just like doing life like normal, but like the tumor started growing, and she's like, Joe, I have to go back on chemo. So this would be her second time on chemo. And she was like, I need you, if you're willing, can you record more? Like, can you film more of my life, the ups and the downs? Because the first time she did chemo, she didn't share with the world what she was actually going through. And so no one really knew the highs and the lows. No one really knew the good and the bad, her every day, what it looked like. And so she was like, this time I need you to record it, because people need to see it, because they don't want to give if they don't see what I'm actually going through. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that. So so we started like filming along the way and just kind of like, when she got couple different tests, couple different things. We did like a video where she went through all the side effects of like the chemo that she's gonna go through. We have video of like days that she thinks she's gonna pull through and be like she's gonna beat this, and other days where she's like I just threw up hundreds of dollars of like medicine and I feel horrible, and times where she's just like crying and broke down on the ground. And every time I'm always like, do you want me to record this? And she'll be like, yes. And I'm like, okay. So I have a lot of the good moments and a lot of the bad moments. I have times of us driving to the clinic. I have us time like us going to the hospital when she had her like tube removed. So now I have all this footage of my time living with her. And it's like the good times, the times that we play, and then times that we did the channel, our K-pop reaction channel, and then also the times that she did treatment. And so the project that you are referring to, which I do plan on releasing one day, hopefully soon, is that to our audience, a lot of people know the Joe and Elaine, the E and Joe on the couch who are having fun watching K-pop music videos, and she's looking, vibrant and healthy and dolled up, and they don't see us outside of that couch, on the other days of the week. And so what I want to do is put together a video series of like, this is what living with cancer looks like, not only for her living with cancer in her body, but also like me living with her, living with cancer as her actual caretaker. And so that's kind of like the story that I wanted to weave, but I didn't know that was the story I wanted to tell until I knew that this was nearing the end. Where like our first intention when we first started was going to be like, this is going to be, her glory like story at the end. Like this is going to
Yeah.
be her victory
Story of
story.
survival. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And now towards the end, I'm like, that's not what we're going to tell. And that's heartbreaking to know. And at the same time, I'm like, but this is what is genuine and real and what people actually wanted to see all along.
Yeah. So I'm noticing also kind of the different ways that your structured, you know, type A personality shows up, and also noticing the places where that's not present. Because your process, it starts off very organic and free and no structure, and I'm just catching everything and anything, and maybe it'll turn into something, maybe it won't. So can you share a little bit about that seeming juxtaposition of energies and the creative producer?
So I am very like left brain, right brain. I'm like, I took one of those tests and I'm like literally split down the middle 50% like left brain, 50% right brain. Cause I love schedules. I love like a whole process and a system in place. I like to know what I'm getting myself into, all my ducks in a row. That's me. And then I'm also like creative and just like, I like things that look good and feel good. And like, it's like, I would like to think of it as like coloring abstractly, but within the lines kind of
Mm.
deal. And
I
so
like
like
that.
I want it to look good, but like within the confines of something that makes sense and orderly, but like beautiful and just like kind of free flowing on the inside.
Have you always been like that? If you think back to when you were a little girl, going back before you had all the pain and the heaviness and the judgments and the expectations and all of the things that tend to erode the relationship with our creative selves, when you go back to that that period of your life, that younger little Joe getting her creativity on, not for the sake of anything or anybody else, but just as a pure act of curiosity and creative expression. How did that show up for you?
I think it was more so I kind of like it's more back to this thing of like just creating and making and seeing what I come up with. And then if I liked it, I would rinse and repeat and know like that's how what I wanted to do. As a child, like I remember I was just so creative. I love to like make stuff and create stuff. I remember I think like sometime in second in grade. I don't know where this came up, like where I got this idea, but I got a shoebox and I think like the teacher told a story about some sort of princess and like I think it was like Rapunzel or something where like a princess is up in the tower. And I did the little shoebox with like a little hole. And when you look into it, it's like a little 3D like paper. Like I cut out and made these little paper characters. And I'm like, how did I do this as a second grader? And I did that out of my own like I just felt like doing it and making it. Like I thought of it and I just did it. So I remember these moments of like just thinking and dreaming up of something or just like trying and making something and then just kind of like not like make a plan and execute, but more like, let's try this. Let's see how that looks. And I think once I figured that I like something, I would like rinse and repeat. I feel like looking back, it was like so evident I'm a creative. And in a way, I don't think that was fostered as well as I probably could have or should have, just because I didn't really think being an artist was like a viable career. Because you don't really think about that, like as especially
Yeah.
as an Asian American, that's not really presented to you as much. And
Yeah.
so I feel like not that it was like a lost opportunity, but I think in that like gap between like college or like the end of high school to college where you're like, what do I want to do in life? Like I didn't even like being creative was not even on the radar.
Mm.
So parts of me wishes I could have been better to like the child artist and explored that more to see the grand potential of where that could have gone instead of like as an adult I've been kind of like floundering trying to figure out how to make it work as a viable career. But I
Mm.
think in my essence of who I am, that child artist is still there where I'm just trying to figure things out.
So can you share a little bit more about your context? Because I find it really interesting to have such an expansive, creative confidence in what's possible, but you also come from like structured context of being both Asian American and also growing up in a religious context.
Yeah. So for everyone else out there who's listening, I'm Filipino-American. I'm born and raised here in the States, the first of my family to be here, like born here. And so my mom was kind of the pioneer before like immigrating the rest of the family over. And so I'm like the first, like just all American girl that like did everything that I could that was like super American. Like I graduated high school and moved across the country and have been doing my own thing. Like that's the kind of free spirit that I am. But within the context of like being Asian American, being like first generation here, like there's a lot in the just the culture of being an immigrant here, especially in it's like this ingrained idea for a lot of people that or a lot of Asian Americans that if you are going to get a career, it better be in banking, a doctor, or like a lawyer. Like those are your only choices. There's nothing really outside of that. And so for me as a child, I was always super creative and super academically just really smart. I was just like a smart kid. And so I was always told I was smart. I was like the kid that always got A's, but I loved like creating stuff on the side. And so I remember just kind of growing up with this like I'm an academic. I'm an academic. I'm very smart. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get this degree. I was like, I don't want to do anything with blood. I was like, I don't want to do anything with like law. I'm not very good at like argumenting, like debating things out. So I was like, maybe I'll do something in finance. And so I actually got a degree in finance. Like in my head, a creative job wasn't even an option. It wasn't even something I thought was possible because it wasn't even on my radar. I kind of grew up in this idea of like either you work for the post office like your mom does, you work for Boeing like your dad does, or you become one of these three things, which is like the successful thing. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I have to do finance. And so I got my degree. I ended up working for a Christian magazine as their finance manager. So I went from a Christian a Christian university to a Christian magazine and worked as their finance manager there, nothing to do with the creative side. So I was like on the operation side, on the advertising side, on the client side, and there was a whole nother team that dealt with editorial and design, and I never got to be part of those meetings, so it's kind of sad. um and then I got like let go because the print world got very like hit during that time. It was like right around 2009, and that's kind of when I had to kind of regroup and be like, I don't really want to work in the finance world. And I was like, all this time people kept on telling me that my photography is really good, that I could do this full time for real. Why don't I give this a go? But like learning that as my identity, I've been told all my life that I'm an academic, that I'm really smart, but I'm trying to own up to like my identity being like I'm a creative. And so that's something that I am learning to really kind of like grasp and hold on to as like my identity, instead of being told what I am, but to actually be who I am. And so I think when you look at like, as an Asian American, you're told like, this is what you need to do, this is how you need to be, this is how you need to act. And I'm like, I want to make stuff. And people don't understand that. And so I just want to have like space to kind of live in that without someone else telling me how to be. This whole process is so mega hard, I just have to say, because it's like, one, no one really teaches you how to be an artist, or if they do, I have no idea where they're teaching this class.
Yeah.
Because
and culturally it's like self-harm and isolation. That's how you be an artist.
Yeah. Like people, like there's this like unspoken rule of like the starving artist, and I'm like, that's not necessarily true. There's lots of people making lots of money off of ideas that they licensed, and now they just rolling in the money. So I think one of the hardest things that I had to learn and am still learning is just how to price value to the work that I make. And so especially when you're an artist, when you're first starting, a lot of the stuff that you make isn't necessarily really good, but sometimes it's better than what other people make and try to do. So that's why they hire you. But that's kind of where I had to learn as I go to like price well and figure out like how to license things. I'm at that place where I'm like, the value of like my work isn't just because I made you a flyer. It's because I made you a flyer with my skill set, my design eye, with my style. And that's why it's X amount of dollars. Like I shot that headshot session for you. It's this much money because of my style, my voice, my equipment, the way that I have a whole portfolio behind it.
Yeah, it's a process. And I there it's a really fragile, tender place when your creativity meets the marketplace. That's what you work through, is that relationship, and know that whatever I made certainly contains a part of me, but it's not me. Like that thing can go, that thing can burn, that thing can be sold for millions. Like that is now its own thing. It's of me, but it's not me.
Yeah, I lived in that space for the first few years of like when I started this freelance thing, because obviously I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know how to price correctly. I didn't know my own value and worth in what I was doing. So I lived in that funk, and I lived in this place that I was devalued, and people kind of like not necessarily ran me over, but I let them run me over. And that was the narrative I had in my head. And I would stay in funks for a very long time. And I think it just took like a lot of work, a lot of like mental fortitude, learning how to have a thick skin, and then just being better at what I do, like working on that craft, working on the things, actually being good. And then when you get to this point, I remember, I want to say it was like 2017, I actually like, I started hitting this stride where like things became easier, jobs started coming to me more easier, and I had the ability to choose what I like, which projects to take, and to like price kind of high. And like going from where I was before, where I was like taking scraps from people because I just needed to pay rent, versus like I actually get to choose and I get to charge what I feel like I'm worth. Like that was like mind blowing for me. And now it's like 5 years after that where I'm like, of course that's how much like I'm worth. I feel like it's come to a place now that I've realized that I'm the expert. Like, I'm here to help you like educate you through this process and handhold, like hold your hand through it. But it's like you have to trust me because I know what I'm doing. And so that's why you're paying extra, is because you're coming to me because you know like what my portfolio says. And so it took years before I figured that out. Years, and the confidence and like the actual portfolio to show that like I know what I'm doing. you know but a lot of that was mental, like a lot of it was just breaking the cycle in here. And so it's like, even sometimes when you don't feel it, you just have to keep doing, and you have to keep making, and working on your craft until like that catches up, because it will catch up eventually.
One of the areas that I think you're particularly talented, gifted, skilled, whatever that combination is in the execution, in the landing the plane. Like, there's so many creatives that are just ideas factories, but they don't make it to building. Or if they do, then they get excited about something else and they abandon the other thing before it's done. So can you speak a little bit to how you take projects all the way to their completion?
For me personally, I am hugely a task oriented person. Like, I love to-do lists and I love crossing it off my to-do list. Like, just the idea of like taking out my Sharpie and just crossing it off and being like done with a project is like one of the most satisfying things for me, because I feel accomplished. I feel like I finished something. I'm such a project manager that I'm like, let's figure out what the steps are. What do we need? Who do we need? How do we put this on the schedule? How do I remind people? And so for me, it's like, once I decide like I'm going to do this project, I'm going to do this web series, I'm going to like create this photo essay, like da 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 da, I pull out my little post-it notes and I map something out and I put it on the calendar. I think one of the very first steps is kind of like put it on the calendar, schedule that first interview, schedule that thing. Because if it's not scheduled, it'll never get done. Because it's like, I just need to get it on the calendar and then I know it's on my radar to do. But that's only if I've decided like this is something I'm going to do now. There's other projects I have floating out there that I want to do that I don't think are ready past the ideation quite yet, or past a little bit of like, I'm in like gathering phases of like what I'm trying to do, but it's like on the back burner. And so it's like trying to figure out what's the right one to do now. And for me personally, like, well, I feel accomplished when it's done. I like the whole process from beginning to end. And, ideally, I would like to have a team to help me do stuff and I don't have to do everything on my own. But I like the idea of coming up with ideas and then executing and then delivering. It's fun for me.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's satisfying. So what feels like the place that you want to move into now? Like, just imagine for a second that the money stuff was sorted. Like, you'll make the same amount of money no matter what thing you decide to do professionally. What would come through you if you had that kind of financial freedom?
100%. I just want to be like running a production company, like an art production company of some sort, where I get to make stuff and projects that I absolutely love. And I want to be in a place where my friends who I think would be amazing YouTube personalities, I want to create shows around them. And so if money wasn't an issue, I would definitely not be doing like websites and design stuff. I would be like creating content and producing stuff and just like doing life and recording it and filming it and creating stories around it. And now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
I mean, that was going to be my next question, but not quite as harsh. I was going to say, okay, now let's bring the money back in. Like, do you think that that's not monetizable? Because if so, like, let's talk.
It is monetizable, but I'm trying to figure out a way. It's like I haven't closed that gap yet, because the area and avenue that we are in, the YouTube sphere, is copyrighted. And so we can't make money on YouTube unless we make those other fun bits outside of like the copyrighted material. So if we like went to Korea and just did videos of us like trying Korean food, that would be monetizable. We have to make something that's viral. And so that's why we're trying to build an audience and then push it to the Patreon, because the Patreon people pay a subscription for extra exclusive content. And so that's been actually doing really well. I'd love to grow that more. And then we had our first sponsorship not that long ago. And I'm like, oh my God, we could like, people pay us for us being us doing things. And I'm like, why not? And so it's like I got a little taste of it, but I haven't really had a chance to really develop or dedicate as much as I want towards that to really grow the money side of things. So it's such a hard balance, because it's like this stuff over here brings me joy, is not quite making me as much money as I want to quite yet, and I can't dedicate as much as I want to grow it. And instead I'm spending all my time over here doing stuff that is actually exhausting me and depleting me, but it's like paying my bills. And I'm like, when can that like switch over, or like tip the scales a little bit? And so it's hard, because the more that I work over here, the more I get referrals, and it's like hard to turn away money. And then if money's my like driving force, I have to find a way to actually make this viable, so I can refuse this if I don't want to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a problem that most creative people,
Yeah.
especially creatives who are trying to pursue something professionally, they all can relate to that. And my advice to people who are in that situation is make that the creative problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, I've had to like kind of explore, because it's like in front of our eyes all the time. It's just I don't think a lot of us are aware, but there's like
Yeah.
multiple ways that we could be making money. And at the same time, I think our brain is so fixated on like the one way that we exchange, we do it for like time for money. And I'm
Yeah.
like if we just get into a place that's a little bit more like, hey, there's other avenues to do it, and like other streams of way to do it, and other just
Yeah.
be creative about the way that you are actually the things that you actually want. And so it makes sense. It's just it's hard to get out of that mind space to think outside of the box.
The thing that I keep returning back to, and I say all the time with my clients, is design for the life you want, not just for the life you think is available to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're designing for that, space opens up. And so I think thinking about your life in the same way as you think about a creative project that you don't know how to do yet, but you really want to do it, can
Yeah.
be so liberating to just open up space of possibilities so
Yeah.
something can enter. Like if you
Yeah.
didn't move forward with this, with the YouTube channel, and like you weren't consistent and you weren't really putting it in, then you wouldn't have somebody coming out of nowhere being like, hey, I'll pay you to just
Yeah.
be you. So with all of that in mind, for people who are interested in following you and supporting you and seeing the next unfoldings of your creative evolution, where is the best place for people to do that?
The place that you actually could see me and what I'm doing and what is up with me and what I'm actually creating is my K-pop reaction channel, which is like this fun, quirky little niche that I live in where I create videos about my friend and I reacting to K-pop music videos, and we invite our friends over and we all watch it together. It's a lot of fun, and we plan on doing K-dramas, and then hopefully one day we would love to go to Korea, because Elaine loved Korea and we would love to go there in honor of her. Um, and so that is where you could actually find me is on our K-pop channel. It's called K-pop Crash Course. And we have a Patreon, and we have exclusive content over there where we just are just completely unhinged, and it's amazing and I love it, and it's a lot of fun, and I get to like interact with a lot of my patrons and just build relationships. And it's this weird parasocial thing, but I'm like, I love it. Like I do that with other creative like YouTubers, and I'm like, it would make sense that people would want to do that with us. And so that's the place that you could actually get a hold of me.
I have just one more closing question here. Is if you had some opportunity to speak to your younger self. If you could speak to little Jo in that state, what would you tell her?
If I could go back, I would go back to like high school Joe and like talk to the girl that like is an academic, but also is like just super creative and just be like, you have more options. Like you have options than just like this pathway that is kind of in front of you. And life is more than just these three things. And so like I'm because as a child and all the way through like high school, like I loved television, love television, film, television, pop culture. I was like pop culture queen. And I'm like, if I knew that back then, that you could have a career doing like television writing or like comedy or wardrobe or like that is an actual creativity, like that's an outlet of like creativity that people make a career out of. And I just had no, like my eyes couldn't see that back then. And so I feel like if I could go back to the Joe in high school and just be like, yeah, you see that catalog right there from J. Crew or like, Gap, that's someone's job to photograph that. Or like over here where like someone is creating like these really cool outfits, someone is designing that. That's an actual creative job. And I think that's what I would do, is just kind of go around to be like, hey, all those comedy shows you really love, it's because people make a career out of it. And I would spend a lot of time to be like, you have so many more options than you think you do, and you don't have to stay in this one lane. And like in the same way, I love to tell like my younger cousins and my like just like family members who are like coming of age, I'm just like, I see you're really good at drawing. I see that you're really good at cooking. Like I want to encourage them in that aspect, that they don't always have to be a nurse, that they don't always have to work at Boeing. Like if you want to be an artist, you can make money doing that. Like I would try to help you find a way there. And so if I couldn't do that for myself, I definitely want to do that for like my little cousins, because they're so talented. I just think that they aren't really afforded all their options. Like no one really tells them about it. So I want to be the one that's like, yeah, you guys can do it and people will pay you for it. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Art of Lost and Found podcast. I hope that you are feeling inspired and empowered to go forth and explore your curiosity and creativity. As always, if you want any more information about any of our guests or the show notes or anything we discussed on today's episode, you can head over to www.brookeeston.com/podcast. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.